They thought he was nobody, just a guy in a hoodie sitting in seat 1A, disturbing the aesthetic of first class. They didn't check his ID. They didn't check his net worth. They just checked his skin color and called the police. But when Captain Richard Thorne kicked Dante Sterling off Flight 402, he didn't just delay a flight. He triggered a financial nuclear winter. Dante didn't scream. He didn't fight. He stood on the tarmac, pulled out his phone, and made a single 19-second call. By the time the cabin doors closed, a $700 million credit line was frozen, the airline's fuel contracts were voided, and the arrogant captain was about to realize he was sitting in the cockpit of a plane that legally didn't exist anymore. This is the story of the most expensive mistake in aviation history. The rain at JFK International Airport was relentless, hammering against the reinforced glass of Terminal 4. Inside the exclusive first-class lounge of Royal Horizon Airlines, the atmosphere was a hermetically sealed bubble of soft jazz, clinking champagne flutes, and the quiet rustle of Italian silk suits. Dante Sterling sat in the corner, far away from the buffet and the bar. To the casual observer, and there were many casual observers judging him right now, he looked like an anomaly. He wasn't wearing the standard uniform of the lounge, no bespoke Savile Row suit, no Patek Philippe watch flashing on his wrist, no entourage. Dante was wearing a charcoal cashmere hoodie, black joggers, and a pair of worn sneakers. He looked exhausted. He looked young, and, most notably to the other patrons, he was a black man, sitting alone in the most expensive section of the airport, sipping sparkling water. What the room didn't know was that Dante had just come from a 72-hour negotiation marathon in Singapore. They didn't know that his hoodie was Loro Piana and cost more than most of their cars, and they certainly didn't know that Dante Sterling was the founding partner of Sterling Vanguard, a private equity firm that specialized in distressed assets and hostile restructuring. Dante bought broken giants and either fixed them or sold them for scrap. He just wanted to sleep. He had a ticket for seat 1A on Flight 402 to London Heathrow. He closed his eyes, leaning his head back. "Unbelievable," a voice rasped nearby. Dante didn't open his eyes. He knew the tone. He'd heard it in boardrooms, country clubs, and elevators his entire life. "Is the lounge open to the general public now? I thought membership fees meant something." Dante cracked one eye open. Standing 6 feet away was a woman who looked like she was carved out of old money and malice. Eleanor Vance. She was in her 60s, draped in a Chanel boucle jacket, clutching a Louis Vuitton dog carrier that likely contained a creature trembling with anxiety. She was glaring at the lounge concierge, pointing a manicured finger at Dante. "Ma'am, that gentleman is a ticketed passenger," the concierge said softly, looking uncomfortable. "He looks like he's waiting for a bus," Eleanor snapped, her voice carrying across the quiet lounge. "He's making people uncomfortable. Look at him. He's slouching." Dante sat up straight. He looked at Eleanor. He didn't scowl. He offered a small, polite smile. "Good evening, ma'am. I hope you have a safe flight." Eleanor recoiled as if he had spat at her. She turned her back to him, addressing the concierge again. "If I have to sit near that on the plane, I will be writing a letter to the board. My husband, Thomas Vance, plays golf with your CEO." Dante's smile widened by a fraction of an inch. Thomas Vance, the real estate mogul who had just defaulted on a massive loan in Miami. Interesting, Dante thought. Small world. He checked his phone. A message from his CFO, David. "The acquisition papers for the airline logistics merger are on your desk. Sign when you land." Dante typed back. Might be a delay. Encountering turbulence on the ground. The boarding call chime sounded. "First-class passengers for Flight 402 to London. Please proceed to the gate." Dante stood up, shouldering his leather weekender bag. Eleanor Vance was already rushing the gate, practically shoving past a young mother to get to the front. Dante waited. He preferred to be the last one on. He wanted the minimum amount of time interacting with humanity before he passed out for 7 hours. When he finally walked down the jet bridge, the air was cold. He stepped onto the plane, turning left toward the sanctuary of first class. There were only 8 suites. They were fully enclosed pods with sliding doors, lie-flat beds, and 24-inch screens. Dante found Seat 1A. He stowed his bag and sat down, immediately reaching for the noise-cancelling headphones. "Excuse me." It wasn't a question. It was a command. Dante paused, headphones halfway to his ears. He looked up. Standing in the aisle was the flight service director, the head flight attendant. Her name tag read Beatrice. She had a tight, frozen smile that didn't reach her eyes, and her posture was rigid. "Yes?" Dante asked. "May I see your boarding pass, please?" Beatrice asked. Dante frowned slightly. He had already scanned it at the gate. The gate agent had smiled and welcomed him by name. But he nodded. "Sure." He pulled up the QR code on his phone and held it out. Beatrice didn't scan it. She barely looked at it. She looked at him. "Sir, I need to see the actual ticket, or a confirmation email. Sometimes the app glitches for upgrades." The implication hung in the air like smoke. Upgrades. She thought he had used miles, or an employee pass, or had simply snuck in from economy. "It's not an upgrade," Dante said, his voice calm, deep, and steady. "I purchased the fare full price. Seat 1A. "I find that hard to believe." Eleanor Vance's voice cut in from seat 2A, directly behind him. She was leaning over the partition, sipping a pre-flight mimosa. "Beatrice, dear, check it thoroughly. I suspect there's been a system error. We can't have the cabin compromised." Dante felt the heat rise in his neck, but he pushed it down. He was a shark in a world of goldfish. He didn't need to bark. "Check the manifest, Beatrice. My name is Dante Sterling." Beatrice tapped on her tablet. She frowned. She tapped again. "I see a D. Sterling here, but the system is flagging it as a high-priority VIP profile. It requires a secondary identity verification code." She looked at him with skepticism. "Usually, VIPs of this status don't dress like, well, they don't look like you." "And what does a VIP look like, Beatrice?" Dante asked quietly. The cabin went silent. The other 4 passengers were watching now. "Someone who belongs," Eleanor Vance muttered loud enough for everyone to hear. "Sir," Beatrice said, her voice hardening, "I'm going to have to ask you to step out of the suite while we sort this out. You're blocking the aisle flow." "I am in my seat," Dante said. "I'm not moving." Beatrice pressed the call button for the cockpit. "Captain, we have a situation in first." 3 minutes later, the cockpit door opened. Captain Richard Thorne stepped out. Thorne was a man who loved the sound of his own authority. He was tall, silver-haired, and wore his hat with a rake that suggested he thought he was flying a fighter jet in 1945, not a commercial airliner in 2024. He adjusted his tie and loomed over Dante's seat. Beatrice whispered rapidly in his ear, gesturing to Dante's hoodie, then to her tablet, then to Eleanor Vance, who was now feigning distress, clutching her pearls. Thorne nodded, his jaw set. He turned to Dante. "Son," Thorne started. Dante's eyes narrowed. "Mr. Sterling," Dante corrected. "Listen to me," Thorne said, dropping his voice to a patronizing baritone. "We have a flight to catch. We have a strict dress code and conduct policy in first class. Beatrice tells me you're being uncooperative and refusing to validate your ticket." "I showed her my ticket," Dante said. "She refused to believe it was mine. That is not my problem. That is a training issue." Don't get smart with me, Thorne snapped. I'm the captain of this vessel. My word is law. Mrs. Vance feels threatened by your aggressive demeanor. I haven't stood up, Dante said, gesturing to his seatbelt. I haven't raised my voice. I'm sitting here trying to go to London. You are disrupting the flight, Eleanor Vance shouted. Get him off. I won't fly with a thug in the cabin. Thorne looked at Eleanor, then back at Dante. It was a calculation. On one side, a wealthy, older white woman, a frequent flyer, the demographic the airline coveted. On the other side, a young black guy in a hoodie, who in Thorne's limited worldview was probably an influencer using points or a lottery winner. Sir, Thorne said, his voice loud now, I am ordering you to vacate this seat. We are moving you to Economy Plus. If you refuse, I will have you removed from the aircraft entirely. Dante unbuckled his seatbelt. He stood up. He was taller than the captain. Thorne took a half step back, intimidated by Dante's physical presence. You're moving me to economy? Dante asked. After I paid $12,000 for this seat? We will issue a refund for the difference. Thorne waved a hand dismissively. Take your bag and go to row 34. Now. No, Dante said. Excuse me? No, Dante repeated. I paid for this service. I expect this service. If you move me, you are in breach of contract. And frankly, Captain, you are making a mistake that is going to cost you more than your pension. Thorne's face turned red. That's a threat. Did you hear that, Beatrice? He threatened the crew. That's a federal offense. Thorne grabbed the interphone. Tower, this is Royal Horizon 402. Requesting airport police to the gate. We have a belligerent passenger refusing captain's orders. Potential security threat. Dante looked at Thorne. He looked at Beatrice, who was smirking. He looked at Eleanor Vance, who was beaming with triumph. Okay, Dante whispered. Okay. He sat back down, pulled out his phone, and unlocked it. He wasn't recording them. He was opening an app called Bloomberg Terminal. The wait for the police took 10 minutes. The plane sat at the gate, engines idling. The air in the cabin was thick with tension. The economy passengers were grumbling, wondering why they weren't moving. 2 Port Authority officers boarded the plane. They looked tired. They walked into first class, their hands resting near their belts. Where's the problem? The lead officer asked. Right there. Captain Thorne pointed a finger at Dante. He's refusing orders. He threatened me. I want him off my plane, now. The officer looked at Dante. Dante looked calm. Too calm. Sir, the officer said, the captain wants you off. You have to get off. We can do this the easy way, or we can drag you. Dante stood up, slowly. He picked up his bag. I'll walk. I don't want to cause a scene. Too late for that, Eleanor Vance cackled. Good riddance. Dante stopped in the aisle. He turned to Beatrice. What is your last name? Halloway, she said, defiantly. Beatrice Halloway. You can write it in your little complaint letter. Nobody reads them. Dante nodded. He turned to the captain. And you are Captain Richard Thorne. That's right, Thorne sneered. And you are banned from Royal Horizon. Dante reached into his pocket. The officers flinched, hands going to their tasers. Dante moved slowly, pulling out a titanium business card. He placed it gently on the drink console of seat 1A. Keep the seat empty, Dante said. It's the most expensive seat you'll ever sell. He walked off the plane. As he walked up the jet bridge, the cool air hit his face. He could hear the heavy door of the aircraft thud shut behind him. They were sealing their fate. Dante didn't stop at the gate agent's desk to argue. He didn't go to the customer service counter. He walked straight to a floor-to-ceiling window in the terminal, where he could see Flight 402 pushing back from the gate. He took out his phone. He dialed a number that was saved as The Wolf. It rang once. Dante, a voice answered. It was loud, chaotic. the sound of a trading floor in the background. "I thought you were in the air. We're closing the Asia markets." "I'm not in the air, Elias," Dante said. His voice was terrifyingly flat. "I was just removed from Royal Horizon Flight 402 by the captain and the police." There was a silence on the other end. A dead silence. Elias knew Dante. He knew that Dante was a man who practiced stoicism, who never let emotion rule business. But he also knew that if Dante was calling him now, blood was about to be spilled. "Are you okay?" Elias asked. "I'm fine," Dante said, "but Royal Horizon isn't." "What do you need?" "Who holds the underwriting for Royal Horizon's fuel hedging contracts for Q3 and Q4? Dante asked. "We do," Elias said immediately. "Through the subsidiary, Vanguard Energy. It's a $700 million revolving credit facility. They use it to pay for fuel daily. Without it, they can't refuel their planes at non-hub airports." "And the bridge loan for their merger with Atlantic Blue? The one they need to sign by Friday to stay solvent?" "That's us too, Dante. Sterling Vanguard is the lead guarantor." Dante watched the plane taxi toward the runway. He saw the face of Captain Thorne in the cockpit window, looking proud. "Freeze it," Dante said. "Freeze what?" "All of it," Dante commanded. "Trigger the material adverse change clause in the fuel contract. Cite operational instability and executive mismanagement. Cut the credit line immediately. Send a notification to the Global Aviation Fuel Clearinghouse that Royal Horizon has no credit." "Dante," Elias warned, "if we do that, their fleet is grounded. If they can't pay for gas, the airports will impound the planes. It's nuclear." "Do it," Dante said. "And Elias?" "Yeah. Call the CEO of Royal Horizon, Preston Calloway. Tell him his airline is technically bankrupt as of—" Dante checked his watch. 1 minute ago. Dante hung up. He watched Flight 402 turn onto the tarmac. "You wanted to fly, Captain Thorne," Dante thought. "Let's see how far you get on an empty tank." While Flight 402 was climbing through 10,000 feet, leaving the rain of New York behind for the darkness of the Atlantic, a very different kind of storm was brewing 800 miles away in Chicago. The headquarters of Royal Horizon Airlines was a glass monolith overlooking the Chicago River. On the 45th floor, inside the mahogany-paneled boardroom, CEO Preston Calloway was pouring himself a scotch. It was 6 p.m., and he was celebrating. "To the Atlantic Blue merger," Calloway toasted, raising his glass to his reflection in the window. "By Friday we'll be the 3rd largest carrier in the world." He took a sip, savoring the burn. The deal was structured perfectly. It relied heavily on a bridge loan to cover their operational costs during the transition, a loan guaranteed by a private equity firm he knew only by reputation, Sterling Vanguard. He had never met the principal owner personally. All dealings had gone through intermediaries. He just knew the money was green, and it was plentiful. The heavy oak doors of the boardroom slammed open. Calloway jumped, spilling scotch on his cuff. He spun around to yell at whoever dared to interrupt his private moment. But the words died in his throat. It was his chief financial officer, Arthur Pendleton. Arthur was a man who typically had the pulse rate of a reptile. Nothing rattled him. But right now, Arthur was pale, sweating, and holding a tablet with shaking hands. "Arthur?" Calloway asked. "What is it?" "The stock." "It's the credit facility," Arthur gasped, loosening his tie. "The revolving credit facility, the fuel card, the maintenance lines, everything." "What about them?" "They're gone, Preston. Frozen. Red-flagged. 10 minutes ago." Calloway frowned, wiping the scotch off his wrist. "Don't be ridiculous. We have a $700 million cap. We're nowhere near the limit." "It's not a limit issue," Arthur said, his voice trembling. "It's a pull. The lender invoked the MAC clause, material adverse change. They've declared us in default due to gross executive misconduct and brand toxicity. Misconduct? Calloway laughed nervously. I haven't done anything. I've been in this office all day. It's not you, Arthur said. He walked over and threw the tablet onto the conference table. It slid across the polished wood and stopped in front of the CEO. Look at the notification. It came directly from the chairman of Sterling Vanguard. Calloway picked up the tablet. The email was short, brutal, and to the point. From Office of the Chairman, Sterling Vanguard to Board of Directors, Royal Horizon Airlines. Subject, immediate notice of default, Mr. Calloway. Effective immediately. Sterling Vanguard is freezing all credit facilities extended to Royal Horizon Airlines. We are also withdrawing our guarantee for the Atlantic Blue Merger Bridge loan. Reason: your senior staff's inability to distinguish between a security threat and your primary investor suggests a level of operational incompetence that makes you a high-risk asset. I do not finance companies that have me arrested. Regards, Dante Sterling. Calloway read it twice. The room seemed to tilt sideways. Dante Sterling, Calloway whispered. The private equity shark? The one they call the Grim Reaper of Wall Street? The very same, Arthur said. And apparently he was on one of our planes tonight. Calloway scrambled for his desk phone. He hit the speed dial for the operations center. This is Calloway. Get me the manifest for every flight departing JFK in the last hour. Find out if a Dante Sterling was on board. He waited, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. Arthur poured himself a drink from Calloway's bottle, not even asking. Sir? The ops director came back on the line, sounding confused. Yes. We had a Dante Sterling booked in 1A on flight 402 to London. But the system shows he was offloaded. Offloaded? Calloway screamed. Why? Was there a mechanical issue? Reading the captain's report now, sir. Captain Thorne had him removed. Cited belligerent behavior, refusal to follow crew instructions, and suspicion of fraudulent ticketing. Says the passenger didn't fit the profile of a first-class customer. Calloway dropped the phone. It dangled by its cord, swaying back and forth. He looked at Arthur. Thorne kicked him off. Thorne? Arthur asked. The cowboy? The one with the ego the size of Texas. He kicked our primary lender off the plane because he thought he looked like a fraud, Calloway said, his voice hollow. He kicked Dante Sterling off the plane. Preston, Arthur said quietly. If the fuel credit is frozen, we can't refuel the fleet in Tokyo, Dubai, or Paris. We have planes landing in an hour that won't be able to take off. We're going to have stranded crews, stranded passengers, and airport impound fees. If this hits the news, the stock drops 40% by morning. The merger is dead. Calloway grabbed his cell phone. I need to call him. I need to call Sterling. Do we have his number? I have the number for his legal counsel, Arthur said. But Preston. Sterling is known for being vindictive. If Thorne humiliated him publicly, an apology isn't going to fix this. I don't care, Calloway yelled. Get me Thorne on the SAT phone. I want to scream at him while he's in the air. We can't just scream at him, Arthur said, checking his watch. Flight 402 is over the water. If they continue to London, they'll land with empty tanks. Heathrow won't fuel them on credit if the account is locked. The plane will be seized by the British Airport Authority as collateral for the landing fees. Calloway's face went purple. Turn it around. Excuse me? Turn the damn plane around, Calloway roared. Get that idiot back on the ground in New York so I can personally drag him to Dante Sterling's feet and make him beg. Captain Richard Thorne was feeling good. The turbulence had cleared. The stars were visible above the cloud layer, and the headache of the ground delay was behind him. He leaned back in his seat, adjusting the trim. "Smooth sailing from here, eh, Evans?" His first officer, a younger man named Timothy Evans, didn't respond immediately. He was staring at the ACARS screen, the text messaging system that connected the plane to the ground. "Captain," Evans said, his voice tight, "we just got a message from dispatch. It's marked critical." Thorne frowned. "What is it? Weather in London?" "No, sir. It says, abort crossing. Return to JFK immediately. Company directive." Thorne laughed. "Return? We're an hour out. That's ridiculous. It's probably a glitch." "It's not a glitch, sir. Look at the follow-up." Evans pointed to the screen. "MSG-2. Captain Thorne. Auth code 99 Alpha. This is CEO Calloway. Turn the bird around now. Do not proceed to LHR. Fuel credit denied at destination. Repeat. Credit denied." Thorne stared at the glowing green text. "Credit denied? What does that mean? We're Royal Horizon. We don't get credit denied." "Sir," Evans said, looking nervous, "if we land in London and can't pay for fuel or the gate fees, they'll impound the aircraft. We'll be stuck there. And if the CEO is messaging personally—" Thorne felt a cold prickle of dread at the base of his spine. He remembered the man in the hoodie, the calm voice. "It's the most expensive seat you'll ever sell." "That kid," Thorne muttered. "Who the hell was he?" "Sir, we need to make a decision," Evans pressed. "We're approaching the point of no return. If we go any further, we have to commit to Europe. We need to dump fuel and turn back now." Thorne slammed his hand on the dashboard. "Damn it! This is going to look terrible on my record." "I think your record is the least of our worries," Evans muttered under his breath. Thorne grabbed the PA microphone. He took a deep breath, putting on his captain voice, authoritative, soothing, fake. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Thorne from the flight deck. I'm afraid I have some bad news. Due to unforeseen administrative complications, we have been ordered by company headquarters to return to New York JFK. We will be dumping fuel to reach a safe landing weight and turning around shortly. We apologize for the inconvenience." The cabin erupted. In seat 2A, Eleanor Vance spilled her second mimosa. "What? Unforeseen administrative complications? What kind of nonsense is that?" She slammed the call button. Beatrice Halloway came rushing down the aisle, looking pale. The crew had already heard the rumors from the galley intercom. "Beatrice!" Eleanor shrieked. "Why are we turning around? I have a gala in London tomorrow night." I don't know the full details, Mrs. Vance," Beatrice stammered. "The captain just said—" "I demand to speak to him!" Eleanor yelled. "This is unacceptable. Is it because of that thug we kicked off? Did he call in a bomb threat?" Beatrice froze. The thought hadn't occurred to her, but it made sense. I'll ask the captain." Beatrice went to the cockpit and buzzed for entry. When she stepped inside, the atmosphere was funereal. Thorne was wrestling with the flight computer, inputting the return coordinates. "Captain," Beatrice said, "Mrs. Vance is asking if the passenger, Mr. Sterling, called in a threat." Thorne turned slowly. His face was grey. He had just received another message from Calloway via ACARS. It simply read, "The passenger was Dante Sterling. Google him. You are fired the moment the wheels touch the ground." Thorne looked at Beatrice. "No, Beatrice. He didn't call in a threat. He called in a debt." "I don't understand." "He owns the bank, Beatrice," Thorne whispered, the realization crushing him. "He owns the bank that pays for our fuel, and we treated him like a vagrant." Beatrice's hand went to her mouth. She remembered the look in Dante's eyes, the way he had politely asked her to check the manifest, the way she had sneered at his hoodie. "Oh my God," she whispered. My pension. Better buckle up, Thorne said, staring out at the black ocean. It's going to be a rough landing. The wheels of Royal Horizon Flight 402 kissed the wet tarmac of JFK with a violent thud, a physical manifestation of the crash the airline's stock was currently experiencing on the Asian markets. Inside the cockpit, Captain Richard Thorne was no longer the king of his castle. As he taxied the massive Boeing 777 off the runway, the usually routine chatter of the tower was replaced by a clipped, icy tone from ground control. They weren't being directed to a gate. They were being directed to a remote hardstand, the penalty box of the airport, usually reserved for hijacked planes or infectious disease quarantines. Tower, this is Horizon 402. Thorne keyed the mic, his voice cracking slightly. We have passengers expecting a gate. Why are we going to the hardstand? Horizon 402, be advised. The controller's voice crackled back, void of sympathy. Your gate access has been revoked by the Port Authority. Outstanding docking fees. Also, airport police are requesting you shut down engines immediately upon arrival. They are boarding the aircraft. Thorne slumped in his seat. Beside him, First Officer Evans was frantically texting his union rep, refusing to make eye contact. Through the rain-streaked windshield, Thorne could see the flashing red and blue lights of half a dozen police cruisers waiting for them. Beyond that, the perimeter fence was lined with news vans. The satellite dishes were extended, beaming his failure to the world. Inside the cabin, the atmosphere was mutinous. The passengers, tired, confused, and angry, were demanding answers. But Eleanor Vance, in seat 2A, was strangely silent. She was staring at her phone, her face illuminated by the glow of a news alert. Black CEO kicked off flight, revealed as banker holding airline's debt. The headline made her stomach drop. She looked at the empty seat in front of her. Seat 1A. The seat she had fought so hard to keep pure. It now looked like a gaping maw, ready to swallow her whole. 3 miles away, on the private side of the airport, the atmosphere was quiet, sterile, and smelling of expensive leather and jet fuel. Dante Sterling stood inside the massive hangar owned by Sterling Vanguard. In the center of the polished concrete floor sat his personal Gulfstream G650ER. It was a masterpiece of aviation, sleek and silver, a predator compared to the lumbering commercial cattle car he had been kicked off of. Dante wasn't looking at the jet. He was standing in front of a wall of monitors set up by his advance team. He watched CNN. We are getting reports that Royal Horizon's credit rating has been downgraded to junk status by 3 major agencies in the last hour, the news anchor was saying. This follows the unprecedented decision by Sterling Vanguard to freeze all liquid assets. We have fuel trucks turning away from Royal Horizon planes in London, Tokyo, and Los Angeles. The fleet is effectively paralyzed. Dante took a sip of espresso. He looked calm, but inside, a cold fire was burning. He had been humiliated, not just as a businessman, but as a man. The look in Beatrice Halloway's eyes when she demanded his ticket. That wasn't policy. That was prejudice. His phone buzzed on the steel table. The screen read, Calloway, CEO. Dante let it ring 4 times before answering. This is Sterling. Mr. Sterling! Preston Calloway's voice was a high-pitched mess of panic and wind noise. Please, God, don't hang up. I'm at the airport. I landed 20 minutes ago. I know, Dante said, glancing at a monitor showing a flight tracker. You took a charter. A Citation X, small plane, bumpy ride. Mr. Sterling, listen to me, Calloway begged. We are bleeding out. The board is screaming. The shareholders are revolting. I need you to lift the freeze. Just give us the fuel credit back. We have 10,000 passengers stranded globally right now. That sounds like an operational inefficiency, Preston, Dante said, his voice smooth and dangerous. I don't finance inefficiency, and I certainly don't finance companies that treat their primary lenders like criminals. I will fix it, Calloway shouted. I will fire everyone. I'll burn the policy manual. Just tell me what you want. I don't want an email, Preston, and I don't want a phone call. What do you want? I want the people responsible, Dante said. I am at my hangar. Gate V12. You have 45 minutes before I take off for London on my own jet. If you're not here by then, with the cargo I require, the freeze becomes permanent. I'll push the company into Chapter 7 liquidation by morning. Cargo? Calloway asked, confused. What cargo? The captain, Dante said, and the woman in seat 2A. Mrs. Vance, I can't force a passenger to... Then explain to your shareholders why their stock is worth 0, Dante said, and ended the call. 38 minutes later, a convoy of black SUVs screeched to a halt outside the Vanguard hangar. The heavy steel doors rolled open. Preston Calloway walked in first, his tie crooked, sweat beading on his forehead, despite the chill in the air. He looked like a man who had just run a marathon in a suit. Behind him, flanked by 2 of Calloway's corporate security goons, walked Captain Richard Thorne. The pilot looked smaller without his hat. His jacket was unbuttoned, his posture defeated. He wasn't walking with the swagger of a man who commanded a Boeing. He was walking like a man marching to the gallows, and trailing behind them, clutching her Louis Vuitton dog carrier, as if it were a life raft, was Eleanor Vance. Her mascara was running. She had been pulled off the plane by Port Authority police, threatened with arrest for inciting a disturbance, and then practically dragged into Calloway's car with the threat of a civil lawsuit that would bankrupt her. They walked across the vast, empty expanse of the hangar floor. The sound of their footsteps echoed. Dante stood at the base of the stairs to his Gulf Stream, flanked by 2 of his own security detail, men who looked like they were carved out of granite. Dante didn't smile. He didn't offer a hand. He stood with his hands in the pockets of his hoodie, the same hoodie that had started it all. "Mr. Sterling," Calloway gasped, stopping 5 feet away. "We're here." Dante ignored him. His dark eyes locked onto Captain Thorne. "Captain," Dante said. The single word hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Thorne looked up, his eyes bloodshot. "Mr. Sterling." "You have a nice plane, Captain," Dante said, gesturing vaguely toward the tarmac outside. "But it doesn't fly very well without gas, does it?" "No, sir," Thorne whispered. "Tell me," Dante said, taking a step closer. "When you looked at me in seat 1A, what did you see?" Thorne swallowed hard. "I saw a passenger who didn't fit the profile." "The profile," Dante repeated, tasting the word like sour milk. "And what is the profile of a man who underwrites a $700 million loan? Does he wear a tie? Does he have white skin? Does he look like him?" Dante pointed at Calloway. "I made a mistake," Thorne stammered. "I was trying to protect the flight." "You weren't protecting the flight," Dante snapped, his voice rising for the first time, echoing off the metal walls. "You were protecting your ego. You were protecting your worldview. You saw a young black man in a position of status, and your brain couldn't process it. So you decided I was a threat. You decided I was a fraud." Dante pulled his phone out. "I just bought your debt, Captain. Which means, technically, I own the lease on the aircraft you fly. I own the fuel in the trucks. I own the mortgage on the simulator you train in." Dante leaned in, his face inches from Thorne's. "You kicked your boss off the plane." Thorne flinched. The reality of his career ending washed over him. Dante turned his gaze to Eleanor Vance. She shrank back, clutching her bag tighter. "And you," Dante said softly. "The woman who wanted a comfortable flight. I didn't know, Eleanor wept. I was stressed. I just wanted— You wanted exclusivity, Dante finished for her. You felt that my presence devalued your experience. You called me a thug. I'm sorry, she sobbed. I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't pay the landing fees, Dante said coldly. But you know what does? Karma. Dante looked at Calloway. Do you know who her husband is? Calloway shook his head, bewildered. No. Thomas Vance, Dante said. Real estate developer. Miami. Over-leveraged. Dante turned back to Eleanor. I was reading his file on the plane before the captain interrupted me. He's asking for a bridge loan to save his South Beach portfolio. Guess who he's asking? Eleanor went pale white. Her knees actually buckled, and one of the security guards had to steady her. No, she whispered. Please. That's our entire life. He's asking Vanguard Capital, Dante said. My firm. Dante pulled out his phone and tapped the screen once. I just sent the rejection email, citing character concerns of the principal's associates. That's you, Eleanor. You are the character concern. You can't do that, she shrieked. You're destroying us. You tried to have me arrested because you didn't like my hoodie, Dante said, his face stone cold. I'd say we're even. He turned his back on them, facing Calloway. Mr. Sterling, please, Calloway interjected, sensing the violence of the moment. The fuel, the airline, we can't survive the night. Dante looked at his watch. He had extracted his pound of flesh. He wasn't a sadist. He was a corrector of balances. You'll get your fuel credit back, Dante said. Calloway let out a breath he had been holding for 3 hours. But the terms have changed. Name them, Calloway said instantly. First, Dante pointed at Thorne, he's fired. For cause, publicly, and I want his pilot's license flagged for a safety review. Done, Calloway said. Thorne put his face in his hands. Second, Dante pointed at Eleanor, banned for life, and you sue her for the cost of the fuel dump, every penny. Done. And third, Dante said, walking toward the stairs of his jet, I want a seat on the board, and I want full veto power over your diversity and inclusion training. I'm going to clean your house, Preston. I'm going to make sure that the next time a kid in a hoodie sits in 1A, nobody blinks an eye. You have my word, Calloway said. Dante stopped on the third step. He looked back at the group, the CEO, the broken captain, and the ruined socialite. Good, Dante said. Now get off my airfield. He turned and ascended the stairs. The heavy door of the Gulf Stream hissed shut, sealing him inside the world he had built, a world where respect wasn't requested. It was purchased, enforced, and absolute. Outside, in the cold rain, Captain Thorne watched the jet engines spool up, realizing with a sickening sinking feeling that he would never fly again. The world did not wait for the sun to rise before passing judgment. By the time the markets opened in New York, the incident on Flight 402 had mutated from a corporate dispute into a global phenomenon. A passenger in SAT 3C, a young tech entrepreneur who had remained silent during the altercation, had filmed the entire removal. The video, titled "Billionaire CEO Kicked Off for Wearing a Hoodie," had amassed 14 million views overnight. The visual of Captain Richard Thorne pointing his finger in Dante Sterling's face, followed by the calm, terrifying silence of Dante pulling out his phone, was playing on loop on every major news network. The stock ticker for Royal Horizon Airlines, RHA, didn't just drop, it disintegrated. In pre-market trading, shares fell from 42.50 to 18 $. The market capitalization of the airline evaporated by $3.4 billion in 4 hours. But for Dante Sterling, sitting in his penthouse office overlooking Central Park, This was no longer about emotions. It was about acquisition. "The stock is bottoming out," Elias shouted from across the trading floor of Sterling Vanguard. "Everyone is dumping. Institutional investors are fleeing. The pension funds are out." Dante stood by the window, watching the city wake up. He wore a fresh suit today, navy blue, custom-tailored, impeccable. The hoodie was gone, but the lesson remained. "Buy it," Dante said softly. Elias froze. "What?" "Buy it all," Dante commanded, turning to face his team. "Every share that is dumped, I want Sterling Vanguard to pick it up. We aren't just taking a board seat, Elias. By the time the closing bell rings today, I want to be the majority shareholder." "Dante, that's a hostile takeover on a falling knife," Elias warned. "The brand is toxic right now." "The brand is toxic because of the people running it," Dante corrected. "Planes are just metal and plastic. The value is there. The roots are there. Once we cut out the cancer, the patient will recover. Buy the dip, aggressively." While Dante was buying an airline for pennies on the dollar, Eleanor Vance was watching her life dismantle itself in real time. She sat at her kitchen island, staring at her phone. Her inbox was full of hate mail. Her Instagram, usually a curated gallery of garden parties and charity luncheons, was flooded with thousands of comments calling her a bigot. The video clearly showed her sneering face and heard her voice calling Dante a thug. The front door slammed with enough force to shake the chandelier. Thomas Vance stormed into the kitchen. He was a large man, usually red-faced from wine, but today he was grey with shock. He threw his briefcase onto the marble counter, shattering a vase. "Did you enjoy your mimosa, Eleanor?" Thomas roared. Eleanor flinched. "Thomas, please! I didn't know who he was. He looked like a nobody." "A nobody?" Thomas laughed, a manic, hysterical sound. "That nobody just personally killed the South Beach refinance. Do you understand what that means?" "We can find another bank," Eleanor said, her voice trembling. "There is no other bank," Thomas screamed. "Not for this kind of leverage." Sterling Vanguard was the lead underwriter. When they pulled out this morning, they flagged my credit profile in the interbank system. They marked us as reputational hazards. Wells Fargo just called. They're calling in the personal lines of credit. Chase cancelled the platinum cards. "Thomas, stop!" Eleanor cried. "We have 30 days, Eleanor," Thomas said, leaning over her, his eyes cold. 30 days before the bridge loans default. We are going to lose the Miami properties. We are going to lose the Hamptons house. And quite frankly, looking at the legal bills I'm about to face for your little disturbance. Lawsuit, the airline is threatening. We might lose this house too." Eleanor stared at him. "The airline is suing me?" "Royal Horizon is under new management as of an hour ago," Thomas spat. "They issued a statement. They are suing you for the cost of the fuel dump and the airport fees for the return to JFK. $250,000, Eleanor, because you didn't like a man's hoodie." Thomas grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge and walked out. "I'm calling a divorce lawyer. I can't afford you anymore." Eleanor sat alone in the silence of her mansion, the sound of her own breathing, the only thing louder than the ringing of the phone she was too afraid to answer. Captain Richard Thorne sat in a small, fluorescent-lit room at the Pilots' Union headquarters. He was wearing his uniform, but the epaulets, the 4 stripes of a captain, had been removed. Across the table sat the union representative, an old friend named Jerry. Jerry wouldn't look him in the eye. "Jerry, you have to fight this," Thorne pleaded, his hands sweating. "I have 30 years of service. I followed protocol. I perceived a threat. You can't let them fire me with cause. It voids my pension." Jerry sighed and slid a thick file folder across the table. "Rick, I can't do anything," Jerry said heavily. "I listened to the cockpit voice recorder tapes. The new board released them to us." "So? So you didn't follow protocol," Jerry said, pointing to a transcript. "Protocol requires you to personally verify the passenger's credentials if there is a dispute. You didn't look at his ticket. You didn't contact ground ops to verify his status. You took the word of a flight attendant and a biased passenger, and you escalated immediately to law enforcement. That's negligence." "It was a mistake," Thorne yelled. "I made a mistake." "The problem, Rick, is who you made the mistake with," Jerry said. "Dante Sterling is now the chairman of the board. He has launched an internal audit of all your past conduct reports. They found 3 other complaints from minority passengers in the last 5 years that were swept under the rug. He's using them to build a pattern of behavior." Jerry closed the folder. "The airline is offering you a deal," Jerry said. "What kind of deal?" Thorne asked, hope rising slightly. "You resign voluntarily. You surrender your license to the FAA immediately. You sign a non-disclosure agreement." "And if I do?" "They won't sue you for the operational costs of the flight turnaround," Jerry said. "But the pension is gone, Rick. You're walking away with nothing but your 401k. "And if I fight it?" "Sterling has made it clear," Jerry whispered. "He said he will spend $10 million in legal fees just to bury you. He said he will make sure you never fly a crop duster again, let alone a jet. Take the deal, Rick. Go retire in Florida and hope nobody recognizes you." Thorne slumped back in his chair. The skies were closed to him forever. He was grounded. The rebranding of Royal Horizon Airlines was subtle but powerful. The logo was sharpened, the colors deepened to a regal navy and silver. But the real change was on the inside. Dante Sterling sat at the head of the boardroom table. He had cleaned house. Calloway was gone, replaced by a ruthless female operations expert from Singapore who didn't tolerate inefficiency or bias. The entire flight crew training manual had been rewritten. "The Q3 numbers are in," the new CFO announced. "Revenue is up 15%, but more importantly, customer satisfaction in the premium sector is at an all-time high. The Sterling Standard training program is working." Dante nodded. He didn't smile often, but he was satisfied. He checked his watch. "I have a flight to catch. Wrap it up." He left the building and headed to O'Hare Airport. Today he wasn't flying private. He wanted to inspect the product personally. He walked through the terminal. He was wearing a suit today, but he carried the same leather weekender bag. As he approached the first-class check-in, the agent looked up. She was young, black, and smiling genuinely. "Good afternoon, Mr. Sterling," she said, recognizing him immediately. "Seat 1A is ready for you." "Thank you, Jessica," Dante said. He walked onto the plane. The crew was waiting. They were sharp, diverse, and professional. There was no tension, no side-eyeing. He settled into seat 1A. As the boarding continued, a commotion started in the aisle. "I'm just saying, I don't see why I have to check my carry-on," a loud voice boomed. Dante looked up. A middle-aged man in a golf shirt was arguing with the flight service director. He was blocking the aisle, red-faced and entitled. "Sir," the director said calmly, a man named David, whom Dante had personally promoted. "The overhead bins are full. We will gate-check it for free. Please take your seat so we can depart." "Do you know who I am?" the man sneered. "I'm a platinum member." Dante unbuckled his seatbelt. He didn't stand up fully. He just leaned out into the aisle. "Excuse me," Dante said, his voice deep and resonating through the cabin. The rude passenger stopped and looked at Dante. "Sit down," Dante said. "It wasn't a request. You are delaying my flight, and trust me, you do not want to make me late." The man looked at Dante. He looked at the calm, steely resolve in Dante's eyes. Then he looked at the flight attendant, who was standing his ground with confidence. The man swallowed his pride, handed over his bag, and sat down in 3B without another word. David, the flight service director, looked at Dante and gave a small, imperceptible nod of gratitude. Dante put on his noise-cancelling headphones. He looked out the window as the engines roared to life. Engines paid for by Sterling Vanguard capital, fueled by Sterling Vanguard credit, flying a plane that operated under Sterling Vanguard ethics. He closed his eyes. The turbulence was gone. While Dante soared at 40,000 feet, Eleanor Vance was standing in line at a budget grocery store in Yonkers. She had moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment after the foreclosure. Thomas had left for a younger woman in Arizona. Her social circle had evaporated. She placed her basket on the conveyor belt. A loaf of bread, some store-brand coffee, and a frozen dinner. "That'll be $22, the cashier said. She was a young black woman with bright braids, chewing gum. Eleanor reached into her purse and pulled out her debit card. She inserted it. Beep. Declined. "Try it again," Eleanor whispered, feeling the eyes of the people behind her burning into her back. Beep. Declined. "Insufficient funds." "Ma'am, do you have another card?" the cashier asked, not unkindly. Eleanor looked in her wallet. It was empty. The alimony check hadn't cleared. "No," Eleanor whispered. I have to put some things back." "Okay," the cashier said. "What do you want to take off?" Eleanor looked at the meager pile of food. She had to put back the coffee. It was the only thing that gave her joy in the mornings. "The coffee," Eleanor said, tears stinging her eyes. "All right, taking off the coffee," the cashier said. "Excuse me," a voice came from behind Eleanor. Eleanor turned around. A young black man in a hoodie was standing there. He looked about the same age Dante Sterling had been. He held a basket of vegetables. "I've got it," the young man said. He swiped his card. "Put her coffee back on. And the rest of it?" Eleanor froze. She looked at the young man, shame flooding her face, so hot it felt like a sunburn. She remembered the face of the man on the plane. She remembered her own words. "He looks like a thug." "Why?" Eleanor croaked. "Why would you do that?" The young man shrugged, picking up his own bags. "My mum raised me right. Besides, you looked like you were having a rough day. We've all been there." He smiled, a genuine warm smile, and walked out of the store. Eleanor Vance stood at the counter, clutching her cheap coffee, and for the first time in 60 years, she truly understood how small she was. She watched him leave, the automatic doors sliding shut, leaving her alone with her groceries and her regret. Dante Sterling had taken her wealth, but this stranger, with $5 of kindness, had taken her pride, and that hurt far worse. And that is the story of how one judgmental captain and an entitled passenger learned the hardest lesson of their lives. Never judge a book by its cover, and definitely don't judge a bank account by a hoodie. Dante Sterling didn't just get revenge, he changed the entire system. It's a reminder that true power isn't about how loud you yell, but about the actions you take when people try to keep you down. What would you have done if you were Dante? Would you have forgiven them, or would you have bought the airline just to fire them? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of high-flying karma, please do me a huge favor. Smash that like button, hit subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new story. We drop new videos every week featuring the wildest revenge stories you've ever heard. Thanks for watching, and remember, be kind to everyone you meet. You never know who holds the credit card. See you in the next video.